Hi, this is Rahiman Sheikh. Welcome to Fortnightly Railway Transportation Systems Podcast. I am the host and railway systems specialist working in this industry for 24 years and counting. This podcast is primarily focused on railway experts who have vast amount of experience and contributed greatly to this amazing industry. This is not a technical seminar but focuses on feel good stories, individual journeys, their success and failures, motivating younger generation to kickstart their career in railways and creating a sense of pride for the railway people who devoted their lives on the most environment friendly public transportation. Our guest for this fortnight is Steve Allday, Executive General Manager at Allday Rail Consultancy Services. Steve started his professional career in 1971 with academic degree in engineering from University of Cambridge. Steve, demonstrably experienced and energetic hands-on leader with a successful record of delivering in both private and public sector operations and in all aspects of rail and intermodal transportation. Working at executive and senior management levels, have a history of successfully delivering critical projects. Hi, Steve. Welcome to Railway Transportation Systems Podcast.
Hi, Raman. Thank you. And thank you for inviting me.
So before I start, it's a generic question I ask everyone. So can you tell me your professional journey story, please?
I'd love to. So I think in the introduction, you said I started that journey back in 1971, which I did. And that journey actually started as people would call today an apprentice, but in those days it was known in British Rail as a probationer. So I was on probation for 4 years.
It's like a training.
Like a training.
Initial.
It's exactly like a training. Modern day equivalent would be an apprenticeship. So I joined the railway back in the UK in a location called March, and I joined what was then known as the Signalling and Telecommunications Department. And at that time, you got a broad training in all sorts of things, everything railway in terms of signalling and telecom. So that would be from the signalling and comms, but it also included things like climbing telegraph pole, laying concrete troughing, doing maintenance, mechanical locking fitting, those types of things, everything to do with interlocking, whether it be the old-fashioned mechanical interlocking right the way through to what we now call the signaling or relay interlocking at that time.
Yep.
So it was a good grounding into all aspects of signaling and telecommunications.
Brilliant. So you worked in all of the conventional interlocking systems.
I did, yes. After my apprenticeship, I actually went into the design office in a place called Norwich in East Anglia. And again, that was predominantly signalling and telecoms design. And then I effectively focused in on communications. So then my background from there on in was predominantly telecommunications, but obviously with the closeness of signaling and telecoms, you kept close to both sides.
Yep.
So that was my first job, if you like, after I finished my apprenticeship.
So signaling and telecommunication, you started from signaling and moved to telecommunications.
Yep, I did. And then from there, I went to what was known as the fault investigation side of telecom. So my role was to support the maintenance staff. So if there was anything that they found that they couldn't resolve or needed more investigation because there was failures, they couldn't understand either what they were or were they systemic, that was my role. And on top of that, I also was the commissioning engineer, if you like, for all the telecom systems that we put in that area, which was in East Anglia at the time. So that was, again, very much hands-on, if you like. So I've gone from learning the ropes as being an apprentice into a design office, then back out into supporting and doing some hands-on stuff again in terms of testing and commissioning.
Well, you moved into two different fields, trying to understand the depth of especially signaling and telecommunications. So what made you move to Australia?
So it was a very long journey. So as my career progressed, I'd done many, many different things. So I've worked in the UK, I worked in the Northeast, I worked in the Midlands, I worked up in Scotland and did various roles from being the works engineer for telecoms through to being the maintenance engineer and then the telecoms engineer for the region, for an area, and then became the engineer for Scotland in terms of the supporting role within the fault control and looking after Scotland in terms of assets, etc. And then moved back into the design office for a little while. So I was in the design office in the Midlands for something like 4 years, managing all of the aspects other than network. So it was things like the public address systems, CCTV systems, elements around signal post telephone systems, all of the systems that operate the railway, and including we had the King's Cross fire disaster. So yep. I was then the engineer that was looking after making sure that we had all the right systems in place for Liverpool, as an example, because we had underground railways there. And from there, during that period of time, that takes me to around about 1986, I think it was, when we started to go through privatisation of the railways.
In UK?
In the UK, yeah. So during that's where I joined Railtrack. And whilst I was in Railtrack, again, I was the zone telecom engineer for what was known as the East Coast Main Line. And then moved into the projects area for a little while, delivering major projects, telecoms projects, and particularly one of the things that I was responsible for. And by the way, my role then broadened out again from comms into other areas. So I was also the project manager responsible for introducing new innovative systems. So bringing in new signalling systems, and also at that time, we had the Clapham disaster, and so I was the project manager that managed the development of what was known as TPWS, the Train Protection Warning System, which then got rolled out throughout the whole of the UK. I also, which I found was a bit, I recognised it was a project that they put me in charge of, but it had a distinct end date, which was Y2K, looking at all the systems and the impacts that were vulnerable on Y2K. I can say I enjoyed it for a little while, but I definitely decided I needed another job after Y2K.
Yeah, I know that because even when I was in UK, I was pretty much involved in TPWS. I know what you're talking about.
So I was the one that developed it before it got rolled out. I got it product approved.
Right, amazing.
At that point, so that takes me up to around about 1998, 99. And at that point, as I say, I was working for Railtrack, and then I got approached by the private sector, a company called Balfour Beatty, who did all sorts of things. So they had their own signalling organisation, they had their own overhead wiring organisation and civils. They wanted to branch into telecom. So I set up a business for them there. Some really good times there. So I set a business up from zero to about, we had about 50 people in the end. And eventually, one of the pinnacle points of that was we actually won the contract in a joint venture for the extension of the Channel Tunnel Rail, where we provided all the comms for that. That was an exciting project to win.
Yeah, I agree. I think that company still exists today.
Yes, it does, very much so. Yeah, and it's a tier 1 organisation in the UK, a very big construction company. And I had some good times there.
They would be pretty happy listening this about them.
Oh, I think they would, yes. I think, and some of the people there would be quite pleased. That's why I learnt my commercial edge, if you like, because they certainly taught me how to be a little bit streetwise when it comes to being a contractor and bidding works, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
It was good. It was good fun. Now, one of the things that came out of that was one of the projects that we won was to develop, was to install what we called signal post telephone systems. And this was in London Liverpool Street. So it was one of the biggest stations we have out of London. And having won that job, we bid it with the equipment at the time that was product approved by what was then Network Rail. And within about 2 weeks of us having won that contract, the company that actually supplied the equipment pulled the product from the market.
Wow.
So I then had a very interesting conversation with the client, which was Network Rail, which was basically, so Steve, you've got a problem. To which I replied at the time, well, we do, don't we? Because there was no other product. So again, we were rather fortunate. We had been talking to Siemens at the time, and they had a product that I knew was a standard switch, but capable of being converted into what we wanted as a signal post telephone system. So working with Siemens, we actually developed that product. And then that product got developed, it got approved, and it then became the standard product throughout the UK. For that application. Now, at the time, I got approached by Siemens because they were winning. They just won their first ever job in the UK for a recycling scheme. And they wanted to install absolutely everything that was Siemens, which you understand. And so they came to me because they thought I had the intellectual property rights for that switch. I didn't, but it opened up a good conversation at the time.
You know the process, right?
Yes.
Did you find any difference, Steve? You're talking about the product. So the approval process,
Yep.
is it any different from UK to Australia and to the other parts of the world?
It's probably, I think most of the world has probably adopted or adapted pretty much to what was being done at the time by Network Rail. So it's very similar to certainly what city trains do today. It's very, very similar. And it's quite stringent, and understandably so. There's a lot of paperwork. There's a lot of proving that had to be done. We couldn't simply just test things into the marketplace without a lot of product proving and testing in first. So it was quite interesting. So, by the way, as I said, I got approached to provide this switch for Siemens into this particular project they got. So I went talking to them about that particular project, and I came out of that meeting with a job offer to set up a business for them in telecommunications in the UK. So that was how I moved into Siemens. And set up a business there, which we grew to about 150 people organically. And then from that, we doubled it. I was tasked to go find a company to go and buy that fitted with nice synergies with our business. And that's what we did. So we ended up doubling the size of the business. So in 5 years, we grew from 2 people to over 300 people. And
amazing.
And became probably, in terms of projects, the number one player of the market. And that was fun. So
yes, you led a Siemens a foundation in UK.
In the UK for their telecoms element, absolutely. And obviously then Siemens have done a lot more. They've had other acquisitions, but at the time that was very, very good and really enjoyable. It was something that I really, in terms of looking back, it's probably one of the things I look back with a lot of pleasure. It was challenging, but very, very enjoyable.
It's a sense of pride. You achieved something.
Yeah, and I think what was really nice was that because we grew it organically as we did initially, everybody wanted to be part of the team, if you know what I mean. So it didn't matter who we were. We all pulled together. And the camaraderie was tremendous. It didn't matter whether you were the receptionist or whether you were me as the general manager. We all pulled together. We all were focused on successful delivery of projects.
Yeah, looking into this such a long career, Steve, what do you look up for inspiration?
So I've been very fortunate, I think. So I've had some really good, what I would call mentors. No matter which role I went into, there were some good people around me where I could look back and go, yeah, you listened to them and took on board a lot of the things that they guided. And I think for me, that rounded me into what drives me at this moment in time, which is having enjoyed so much. I see it's almost, I call the railways my family because it is my family. And so my family's been good to me, and it's my turn to be good back to my family, if you know what I mean. So mentoring and training is something I really enjoy. And we've got some fabulous young people coming into our industry.
I concur. I have met some really, really nice people as well.
Yep. You said, by the way, why did I go to Australia? Yep. How did I end up here? So after Siemens, I actually went into a signaling company called Grant Rail for a while. And it was more of a turnaround in that. So turning it around and growing that business a little bit. And I enjoyed that. And then I got approached to go and work for what was known as Metronet. So Metronet was working in London Underground. So it was a big PPP. And I was on the client side of that. And at the time I used to work in London because that's where it was based. But I was was living up in Newcastle upon Tyne, which is, I was doing approximately 7 hours traveling a day and then doing a full day. I kind of thought, I'm probably not enjoying this as much as some things I've done in my career.
You are not.
So one morning I saw an advert for a role in Australia. So I just went on the internet, made an application, was sitting down doing some work on the train at 10 to 4 in the morning at the time, as one does at 10 to 4 in the morning. And my phone rang. And I was going, who on earth is ringing me at 10 to 4 in the morning? It was Australia. And because I didn't realise, it had dawned on me that though I sent that email something like about 3:30 in the morning, it was being picked up and being dealt with. So out of all of that, I decided to come across to Australia and have some interviews. And kind of the next thing was history. So I came across here and went into what was then the South West Rail Link and North West Rail Link projects as the effectively the systems engineer.
Which year was that?
So that was in 2007.
Okay.
And so during that period, and I was only there for about a year because at the time, Northwest Rail Link kind of disappeared, but then eventually morphed itself into what we now call Sydney Metro Northwest.
Wow.
But that took a little while to get to that position. So during that period, after about a year, I got approached by a company called Ansaldo, now Hitachi, to become the alliance manager in the alliance that they had with ARTC in the Hunter Valley. And that was doing lots of different resignaling schemes. But it also stretched down to not just the Hunter Valley, but we also did a lot of work in Adelaide as well, and also in Melbourne. So I was running a design, a project office effectively, which consisted of both designers and also installation teams, construction teams, project managers, delivering multiple contracts for Ansaldo, but our client being ARTC.
Complete program management.
Complete program management, yeah. And I did that for probably about, so that took me through to about 2010, 2011, I think, something like that. And then at that time, Ansaldo had won a contract with Rio Tinto to do what we now call auto haul, the automation of Rio Tinto's fleet up in the Pilbara. And so I was going to say invited. They encouraged me to go over, and I became the alliance manager for that alliance, doing the development work and the early work for RAFA, as it was called then, the Rio Tinto Ansaldo Framework Agreement.
Yep.
Yeah, which became auto haul.
You'll be surprised. I think Rafa was the reason for me to move into Australia as well.
How bizarre.
Some amazing people worked on Rio Tinto.
Yes, they did. Yes, it was really, really good. And at the same time, by the way, my sideline was I was also the head of projects for Australasia and South Africa at the same time. But my day job was RAFA.
Steve, many people know that you have been in the executive and senior management levels. So what do you think is the most dangerous trait in a leader's career?
One thing I've always held true to me, is, as I said to you, I've been very fortunate. The railway's been kind to me, and my family's been kind to me. And I've enjoyed so many different experiences. But the one thing I've always known is always recognize the value of the people around you. And for me, the biggest asset, whether I've been on the client side running organizations, small or large, whether I've been in a design office, or whether I've been doing some of the things like running businesses, your most valuable asset is your people. And that's never lost on me. And so always spend the time to work with your people, understand them, develop them. I'm a great believer in empowerment. Empower them. Let them make decisions, but support them. So for me, everything is all about people and people, relationships, not management, relationships.
There's a fine line between people management and people relations.
There is, but the best form of management, the best management you'll ever get is by building those relationships and supporting people. I said empowerment, and I mean that in the truest sense. So sometimes, and we've all been there, you make mistakes, learn from them. Yeah, a good manager will always support his people, even when they make a mistake. The only thing is just say, did you learn from that one? Because you can always correct mistakes. You can always.
That's a people leader.
Don't know about that one, but I certainly, it's something I always hold true. For me, it's held me in good stead. I've only been as successful because of the people around me, and I recognize that.
I conquer that. Steve, with this 50 plus years of service in this industry, looking forward, what are your current and future goals now?
My current and future goals is one, I have no intentions of retiring anytime soon. I enjoy it too much. And I think we touched on it before. I love challenge. So I really don't mind what that challenge is. I've been really, I've experienced every form of railway type of projects and delivery you can imagine. So light rail, high speed rail, did that over in Saudi Arabia, metros, traditional, what we call, the UK called it high speed. We don't now because they recognise real high speed, but long haul, heavy haul, all types of railways, and every one of them bring different challenges, and you never stop learning. No matter how old you are, you never stop learning. So for me, I want to continue with big challenges. I want to be contributing. In contributing, I also want to that other little bit that I talked about before, which is payback. So working with young people and helping, hopefully, to develop them and let them enjoy the magical journey that I've been on. And anybody can do it. Anybody in this industry can do it. So, I mean, I've explained my background. Now, though I've got a degree, I didn't have that degree. I didn't go to university. I actually went to college, developed that degree over 14 years of going what we used to call day release, which sounds terrible, doesn't it? It sounds like you've been released from prison, but we called it day release and night school. And I did that for 14 years. And over that time, built up and eventually got that equivalent in Cambridge. But what I would say to people is do never think there is a horizon that you can't reach. You absolutely can. This industry really, really gives you so many opportunities. All you need is enthusiasm and love for what you do, and it will pay back in spades.
Wow, there's so much to take in. So with all this, so we spoke about your past experience, current experience. When I hear your story, I got one question. So you worked in light rail, metro, heavy haul, conventional signaling, ETCS, CBTC. So in all these different variations, did you bring lessons learned from one sector to the other sector?
Yeah, absolutely. Because though they're different, there are elements that are common. And we touched on it before. The best way to learn is make mistakes, because you sure as hell don't make them again. But the other thing is not to forget them. So quite often people they talk about, oh well, we'll have to sit down and we'll do a lessons learned, and often they write them down and they put them in a file somewhere or electronically these days, and they get lost. So I think the one thing that I've tried to do and other people should do is when you move forward, don't just let them be history, share them so that you can make sure that other people don't make those mistakes and you don't make those same mistakes again. You know, the only way you ever evolve is by making mistakes and learning from them. And take them on.
A completely different question from railways and family. The other key part in our personal lives are friends. So how do your closest friends describe you?
Oof, that's a good question. I think they probably would describe me as probably a little bit of a workaholic, perhaps.
You are.
But I probably recognise that. But that's, for me, it's not a workaholic. Yeah, I enjoy it. I love what I do, and so therefore it's not work. It's doing my hobby. I'm one of the lucky people whose hobby is also gets paid for. So they would probably say that I am a workaholic. I'd like to think they would also say that I listen and I do try to guide and help and develop relationships. So I would hope they think me easy to get on with.
I think with my experience with you, I think you're easy to get on, easy to approach. You're highly approachable. Anytime you're there. So with all this, Steve, with all your stories, I would just want to get one advice. What's your advice to the newcomers into this industry?
My advice for them would be embrace it with all your heart. When you come in here, do not, I think I touched on it before, that the sky truly is your limit. You can go as far as you want. As an industry, it offers so many opportunities to learn. It truly does. And it's got some good people with good backgrounds who I think, as I mentioned it before, we call ourselves a family. And I think we truly do look at ourselves as a
Yes.
family. And so as a family, you look after your family. So newcomers coming in, they can expect to meet some really incredible people who will help them. And I would always encourage them to ask questions and always challenge them. So never be frightened to challenge yourself. Never be frightened to challenge others. Because the other thing that I've certainly found, certainly from my perspective, is don't be shy. If there's something you don't know, ask the question. If you think somebody who's senior to you is wrong, you've got the right to say, excuse me, but I challenge that. And you will just grow. So I think my answer to that question would definitely be come in here, give it your all, and there is nothing you couldn't achieve. Nothing you can't achieve.
Wow, that's a nice one. Thank you, Steve. Thank for your advices. Thank you for your advice, and thank you for your time with us and sharing your thoughts and telling us your story and giving a boost to the newcomers into this industry. Thank you so much. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
I believe everyone listening to this podcast has got something to take away from today's discussion. If you like this podcast, please listen, follow, and share this podcast within your network. If you believe we should be sharing your story or someone within your network, there is a railway leader who should be here sharing his or her contribution to this industry. Contact me on railway transportation systems at gmail.com. Thank you for your time today. See you next fortnight. Until then, stay safe and take care of yourself.